Welcome to this latest episode of Japan's Top Business Interviews. I'm your host, Dr. Greg Story, President of Dale Carnegie, Tokyo, Japan, and my special guest today is William Boesen, who is the President of the East Asiatic Company. William, welcome.
Thank you.
So how is it that you are running the East Asiatic Company in Japan? How did you get here? What's the background on your leadership experiences in Japan?
Right. Always been fascinated with Japan. Came here first time in '89. And in the 90s, several times as a young student. I did martial arts, and I've done martial arts my whole life, traditional Japanese martial arts. So I've always been into
Me too.
Japan.
So which one were you doing?
I'm doing one called Bujinkan, which is a kind of kobudo, really old style, lots of weapons and grappling and stuff like that. So before Aikido, karate, all those stuff, before Meiji martial arts. And I'm still into it, still practice that regularly.
Good man. So was the martial arts the trigger for the interest in Japan?
Oh, absolutely.
Right. So you started this in, where were you training before you got to Japan?
Oh, I started a dojo actually in Denmark, Copenhagen, originally back in the 86.
Right.
And just saved up money, worked very hard, and came here all the time on martial art trips. So when I was offered a job here in Japan in 2001, I, of course, happily accepted because then I could, train
Exactly.
more.
Sounds like me, exactly. Same thing.
Okay. Which
Same
one
thing.
was that?
Karate.
Karate,
Traditional karate. So I got a scholarship to come here to study, international relations, politics, that sort of thing. But actually, the real reason was to study karate.
Right.
And so very similar.
Yeah. I think the famous TV show Shogun back in the 80s also had some positive influence on me. So ancient Japan and that kind of samurai culture was extremely interesting for me. So that's how I got into it. Did a stint in the military back in the 90s in Denmark, and then went straight out and worked for a company after college, for a company called ISS, which is largest manpower provider in the world. They do facility management, cleaning, security, that kind of stuff. Has 500,000 employees. And we did, at that time, about 100 acquisitions per year globally. And I got in there, got a management position, was sent out to Malaysia for an APAC office, and did really, really well. And then we decided we're going to go into Japan. And we're going to go in and we're going to take over the facility management market, which is called building maintenance in Japan. And we didn't do our study very well. We just barged in here in 2001, and we did a partnership with Mitsui Trading company. And they sent me in and they said, William, you're going to manage the M&A business, and you're also going to grow the local business, which we have. So I had two positions. I worked in Mitsui head office, and I worked down in a local office in Shinjuku. And we failed miserably. It was a incredible learning experience for me how to work in corporate Japan. I thought I knew Japan because I did martial arts.
Did you speak Japanese by this stage?
Zero.
Okay, so you knew a lot of technology, terminology for martial arts, but not much helpful in a business meeting. Yeah?
It was really, happy-go-lucky. I came in. And I was there 2.5 years, and it was really, really interesting. That's where I learned about corporate culture in Japan and how things work. Because I came in with lots of ideas for business development and so forth. This was a sleeping company we came into, and we're going to expand it with organic growth. And all the managers was completely against change. I mean, nobody was on the wagon. Everybody worked against me. Nobody spoke English. So Mitsui allocated one person who could speak English, who was my partner in crime. And eventually, after 2.5 years, we figured out how things worked in there. I learned how the culture works, how the mind works, and we got some organic growth and we got some change going. But in the beginning, it was just a wall I ran into. Very interesting.
So you've basically got how many people in the local office?
There was about 60 people.
That's quite a big chunk of people. 60 people is not small, right?
Yeah, it was a big chunk of people.
And you come in with probably by that stage, you've had some management experience in Malaysia.
Yeah.
None in Japan, apart from doing martial arts, which is not really a management experience at all.
Right.
And so you've got to run this team of 60 people.
No, I didn't. I wasn't even allocated. They put me. I was by ISS, I was sent in, you're going to be a general manager for business development. But when I came in there, I saw on the business card, it said Cacho, so I was a manager. So they put me down, and there was a local Japanese president. So I couldn't get anything through. And it was the standard thing. I came in with very beautiful PowerPoint presentations, and there was no feedback at all in the meeting rooms. People didn't say anything. I couldn't get anything through. So I very quickly learned that I had to work the problem through individual conversations with people.
Mawashi.
Exactly. And back in 2001, Mawashi is basically you need to go out drinking. So I went out drinking with all the key persons, and eventually I started to understand where the resistance came from, what was their issues. And I learned those issues, went back to the drawing board, changed some things, went back, is this more acceptable to you? Eventually it was acceptable. All right, and now we have an operations done work. Now we have to find a customer we can actually present these operations to.
So this is a very interesting example. Like the Japanese team have been doing this for some time.
Right.
The foreigners turn up.
Right.
A lot of sparkly ideas here.
Yeah.
Shiny ideas.
Right.
And no clue about why things are like they are, but we're going to do it this way.
Right.
And all the Japanese are thinking, no, we're not.
Nope.
And we are not going to cooperate, and we're going to sabotage.
Right.
And we're going to put our heels dig in here. We're going to slow everything down.
Yes.
Because we realize this is ridiculous.
This is ridiculous. We tried that before, it didn't work.
Yeah.
And the whole fear of mistakes and so forth, the usual stuff in Japan. But eventually I got it, and then I said, how do I find a new customer who's interested in building maintenance in Japan? I mean, most people are just focused on their core business. Why would they be interested in whoever comes? So I have to go out and find building developers and so forth. And I didn't have that connection. So instead, I went to the American Chamber of Commerce, and they had a meet and greet, which was big time back in 2001, 2, and 3, lots of people. And I found a logistic company who was very interested, just built their own building out in Chiba, and they have several locations across Japan. And I said, can we help you? Sure. I made a proposal, we got it, and we won the contract, and we grew about 50% with that contract alone. So I was a hero, I thought, but I wasn't, because when I came back and the whole thing was done, my assistant got a huge bonus and a huge reward, but I didn't. And I was kind of, perplexed about that. Why wasn't I rewarded? Why wasn't I given the recognition for the outstanding work I did, I thought. And that was disappointing. And I realized very well that I might have convinced middle management to come over to my side, but I failed to convince the top management to see the advantages of having a foreigner influence in the company. And I ran into a completely different challenge, which I didn't know how to deal with. And that was very interesting. I have to say that I had about...
So was the lack of recognition and bonus a punishment of you for doing something different, or...?
Good question. I really don't know. I had 3 bosses in the 2.5 years I was there. So the country managers kept coming and going. And that was a bit of a very aggressive...
Well, the country managers are coming and going from headquarters?
Yeah, from Mitsui. So
from Mitsui?
From Mitsui.
Okay.
And they exchanged them very rapidly because for many reasons, I don't know exactly why, but the guy that was there at that point, he was very frank and very, at least honest, and I'll give him that. He says, I don't want foreigners to work. I don't want to work with foreigners. So he was very honest about it.
Now this is Mitsui Trading Company, one of the biggest trading companies in the world, which has got staff all over the world dealing with foreigners.
Right.
But head office, this guy doesn't want to deal with foreigners. That's quite ironic.
Guy came down. No, he didn't want to. And then that was also in the local company. Then in my work up at Mitsui Boesen, we were working very hard on a team to find targets for M&A to build up our business. And, on this globally, we're doing 100 acquisitions per year.
That's a lot.
So people were expecting at least 5 or 10 in the world's second largest economy at that time. And we couldn't find any, because if you're part of the Mitsui family, you cannot go to a Mitsubishi family or a Sumitomo family or something like that. So you have to go to independent owners.
Yeah.
And independent companies in Japan at that time found it very shameful to sell off their company because they don't have any sons that can take over for the family business. And then even more shameful to sell off to foreigners.
Exactly.
That was a big thing back then.
But just coming back to the thing about the Mitsui group,
right?
And you got the Mitsubishi group and other groups. Why were they off limits? Why wouldn't it have been okay to go after their business and attack them? Why was Mitsui hesitant to do that? Normally in business, you know, your competitors, you're always fighting for business. What's the big deal here?
It's a good question. We were simply told it was off limits. We were told that they would not be interested, and it's simply just the old zaibatsu, you know.
So basically, they see, oh, you're with Mitsui. No, we're not having anything to do with you because you're a competitor. So that's why.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I think so.
Right.
I think so. And then after 2.5 years, I thought, okay, I've done my bit. I've done my duty. It's maybe time to head out or try something new. And I was then approached by a Danish furniture company called Carl Hansen and Son, who does high-end design furniture. And I needed a country manager for Japan. And I accepted that, and I jumped into that, which is completely different. You go from cleaning toilets and floors to stand in front of architects and have very high-end design furniture. And I had no clue the business I went into. And I worked for them 9 years. I got promoted for APAC, so I took care of all Asia Pacific, built up lots of companies.
So you're in charge of Japan plus everything else?
Yes, plus everything else. And we kind of, we grew 5 times our size in those 9 years I was there, which was great.
Sounds pretty good.
It was good. A lot
of traveling.
How many
people were in Japan?
We had a team. I started out with a team with 5, and we eventually, when I left, we were 25.
Nice. So you hired this extra 20 people yourself.
All over APAC.
You got,
all over APAC also.
Right, which is always better.
Yeah.
They're your people. You selected them. They have loyalty to you. You're not inheriting anything.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So in that sense, you became the president in Japan. So you've gone from being the kacho, the section head, not a bad promotion, didn't even go to division head, just went straight to president.
Right.
So what was that like, though? Because you've actually probably been on the receiving end of a very series of harsh lessons about how business is done in Japan in your previous company.
Right.
You've probably been through some harsh lessons personally about how not to be treated by your bosses.
Yeah.
So what did you do to apply what you'd learnt to this new position? And you're the president. You come in. They're all existing. There's 5 people already there.
Right.
You turn up. So how did you approach it? What was your thinking about? Okay, how am I going to do this?
Right. That's a good question. So I always try to think about what's the culture in the organization I go into, and what are their issues in that culture, and it's really hard to comprehend in Japan because we don't speak the language. At least I don't speak it perfectly. I speak some, and you need to figure out what's the drivers in that culture. What are their fears? What is their motivators? And if you just sit as a sacho by the end of the table and give out orders, you're never going to learn anything. So in order for me to understand the culture, the values, what are the issues, I need to listen. I need to have conversations with people. And there we did not need to drink in order to open up and talk. We could actually have an honest conversation. So when we sit and debate business issues, challenges for business plans, how do we execute, what's our vision, where do we want to go from here, I start to ask, why? Why do you feel like that? Why do you say like that? I start to ask, and I don't judge. So eventually I start to understand a little bit the issues that we had in organization. Once you understand the issues, then you can start to challenge and say, well, why don't we do it this way, or why don't we do it that way? So my first approach was not to be aggressive and to be a bully, but instead to sit back and listen. Tell me, what is the business? What is the issues? How can I help? What can I do to problem solve here?
You did well though to hire another 20 people.
Right.
Because it's a small company. Okay, it may be a high-end Danish design brand for furniture, but you know what? There's lots of furniture in this country. It's just like, so what? And how do you convince people to come and join such a small foreign company their parents have never heard of it, their grandparents have never heard of it, the spouse has never heard of it, type of thing. It's not so easy to get people to join foreign organizations at that time.
Right.
So how did you get around that?
Well, first you have to position yourself branding-wise, right? So if you have a high-end brand, it's pretty easy actually to hire people in Japan. Okay. And then of course you open up a showroom in Aoyama which is a high-end area for design. If you have that, you have the right address. There is that effect on people in Japan. You bring in architects for meetings in that area. They think, oh, this must be good. So you already saw
credibility.
Half the story. Yeah, exactly. And branding in that, especially in design, is all about storytelling. So you tell the story by presenting your brand very, very beautifully in a beautiful showroom. In this case, it was a lot of wood furniture with wooden floors, very cozy area. You bring people in, you already got them there. And then you can start talking. So attracting people was actually very easy. They were lining up.
Wow, nice.
Before we had way out west of Tokyo, a showroom out there, we couldn't attract any people. We couldn't get quality people. But as soon as you chose your address in Aoyama, you have that snob effect, which was drawing people. So that wasn't really the issue. The issue was to find the right quality of people, the right caliber of people who could think on their own. And talk to customers, because at that time our customers were retailers. And we grew from about 50 retailers to about 800 retailers in Japan. So we covered everything from Hokkaido to Okinawa. And you need to go out and talk to very local furniture shops, mom and pops, who is sitting up in North Japan, South Japan, West Japan, East Japan. And that requires someone who can be charming, friendly, and still resolve issues out there, resolve challenges. And they can't call me all the time for what should I do. So they should be able to think on their own. That was difficult to find that combination. Very difficult. How do you get people to be confident enough so they can think on their own feet when they're in front of the customer? How do you create such a culture? And that's what I think I work on.
How did you do it?
Well, one of the things I try not to fire people.
Okay.
I'm always, especially in this country, I feel that in my experience, when the new boss comes in and he has to mark his territory and he's going to fire a few people to show off, as Machiavelli said, it's better to be feared than to be loved. That was very good for the Middle Ages, I think, but I don't believe it's that good for now, especially not in a group consensus feeling that you have very much in Japan. I think it shows a very bad image into your culture, and I think it's a very bad signal. I think that we should reward loyalty, even though the skill set maybe is not so strong. And I do believe that you can change people. People are flexible. People can change if you just engage with them. So I engage with people. I keep engaging with them until I got them to my side.
When you say you're engaging with them, what does that mean?
I keep talking to them. We keep talking, and they come up with their arguments, and we discuss that, and we discuss that, and we discuss it, and we go deeper, and we go deeper.
So you and me and everyone else are getting probably 100 emails a day.
Yeah.
You are then traveling APAC a lot, so you're not even in Japan.
Right.
How do you balance out that time, individual time with people, against all the other things, keeping up with head office, APAC's, going crazy, you're expanding that as well. How did you work that balance? Because it sounds very easy to say, I engage people as if you had nothing else to do, but I'm sure you had tons of things to do.
Sure.
So how did you manage it?
Well, I don't believe so much in time management. I believe very much in energy management.
Oh, okay.
So there are days where I have enormous energy and I'm extremely productive and I get everything sorted out. And there are days where I feel completely rotten and my energy is, in the basement. And so I focus on a very few things, the most important things that day, and get that sorted out.
Right.
But I don't do the other 20 things.
Right.
So I believe very much in energy management. And when I have lots of energy, I pick up on all these people that I have forgotten a little bit in my organization and bring them in for conversations, and we go. Now, number two, I try to lead from front. And I engage. I try to do business myself. I assist in business development always. So I try to lead by example. I really try, because then.
So you're going to the meetings with the architects?
Oh, yeah. I always go out to customers. I love being with customers, and I think it's very important to get trust from the staff that I go out with them, and especially when there are issues, when there are troubles. We haven't delivered the product on time. We failed something on the quality. Something else went bad. I go out and I apologize together with my sales staff. Always I go, because then we share the responsibility, and then they know it's okay to fail, and I think that's very, very important. It should be okay to fail. We go out together, and I apologize also. I usually say, always my mantra is that, it's the soccer coach. If we win, it's the team who gets the credit. And if we fail, it's the soccer coach
Gets
who
the
gets
blame.
Yeah. And
So-
that's how it should be.
So how many years you were? 9 years you were there, did you say?
Yeah, 9 years there.
And then
Yeah.
what happens?
2013, I was approached, and they wanted me to take over EAC Japan as a country manager. Which
So East Asiatic Company,
yeah.
that sounds a very old style foreign idea for a name
Yeah.
for a company in Asia.
Right.
The East Asiatic
Right.
Company. So how old is this company in Japan?
It's more than 100. In Japan, it was established 46, 47 in a hotel room in Imperial Hotel. Tokyo was devastated from the Second World War bombing.
Yeah.
At that time, an East Asiatic Company was a global trading company going everywhere. And they were much bigger than Maersk Container we know today.
Where was the
Huge
original?
Denmark.
Denmark.
Yeah,
so
it's a Danish
Danish
company.
global
Very much a
trading
Danish
company, right?
Yeah. And they set up business in 47 doing trading, containers, but everything. Later on, they did a lot of sales of cars, both selling of Japanese second-hand cars all over the world and also importing them and exporting them. But in 2000, basically, they were the only company left standing of the global EAC. The rest of EAC, more or less, settled down, didn't do so well globally.
Oh, okay.
So they were bought over by a company, EAC Japan was bought over by a company called Micromatic, which is into beer dispensing, which is draft beer equipment, producing that. And global customers are breweries, beer breweries. So in Japan today, we serve the four heavenly kings, Asahi, Kirin, and Sapporo, and Suntory, and also craft brewers, of course. So when you go out and have a draft beer and you say, Nama beer kudasai, they don't ask you which one, because there's only one, right, in izakaya. And that's usually our equipment that's in there.
Right.
And this is incredibly exciting market because there's so many small outlets in Japan. It's about 700,000 of them versus America, where you got maybe only 200,000, even though the population is higher, because they've got more beers on tap. In Japan, you only have one, usually, on tap. But the road to market for us is very tough. It's through the brewery and then out to the outlet. We don't serve those 700,000 outlets directly. And that is on a food and safety. So when we come up with new equipment, which I constantly do, constantly innovate and try to come up with new equipment for the market, we are going through incredible, tough quality checks by the breweries.
So Micromatic is, again, where are they from?
Also from Denmark.
Denmark,
so
okay.
I'm still part of that. Yeah.
So when you took over
Right.
East Asiatic Company, were they already doing the beer market at that time, or this is something that you developed?
Yes, they were already.
They're already in there. So
they
you
were already
came
there.
in. This is our business. Is what we do.
Right.
We provide the equipment for the draft beer. Right. Okay. And how many people are in the company when you joined?
We were 9 or 10 people, I think, when we joined,
Okay.
and now we're up to 13 and 14 in Japan. And we were luckily, since 2013 to now, 10 years, we've grown 6 times on the profits.
With 13 people.
Yeah.
That's a very nice business.
That's very nice business. It's
That's
very nice.
having a low fixed cost
Yeah.
overhead on staffing, which
Right.
is usually the biggest expense in the P&L, and
Right.
having a big 6 times profit sounds pretty good to me.
That's very good.
Nice.
We were, it went beautiful. We had a record result every year from 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, perfect. I was the hero. Then came Corona. And Corona, was a big challenge for us, because then suddenly, as you remember, all the outlets in Japan are not allowed to distribute alcohol or serve alcohol. So what do you do?
Yeah.
So we switched around very quickly, and we developed a non-alcohol beer for draft, which is first one in Japan. And we did a system for that. And why do you have a special system for that? Well, you can't allow mistakes to happen. You can't allow some person by mistake put an alcoholic beer on a non-alcoholic draft beer, right? Because people go out and driving their car afterwards. Then you can get sued and all kinds of stuff.
Problem, yeah.
So we developed that new system, and we did really, really well on that during the Corona times. And that is actually a global trend now that's happening.
And what was something that you pioneered in Japan?
It was something we pioneered in Japan.
And then did they take that from Japan and take that global?
Yeah.
Wow, okay. So you're an even bigger hero now.
Yeah. So yeah, that was really, really good for us.
And so for the people who were already in the company when you joined, again, new boss, right?
Right.
New boss comes in. You know, you'd learned quite a bit by this time, your different
Right.
experiences in Japan. So did you have the same approach from the previous company that you applied with the furniture company, or did you try something different this time with the new crop of staff?
Yeah, I thought I could wing it by doing it the same way, but I couldn't.
Now that's
So
interesting.
yeah,
Why not?
I had
Why
to
not?
change because totally different culture. The culture I came into, most of the people had long seniority in the company. They've been there 10, 15, 20 years. Highly technical, knowledgeable people. I could never catch up onto their technological level, what they could do. So I had to earn their trust by giving them respect. And that's how I did it. Had to be a little bit more careful how I approached them. I also learned very quickly to delegate responsibility to them and to make sure that they took ownership. That was really, really important for me. I could see that work with them extremely well. If I delegated responsibility and made sure they took that ownership, then things went really, really well. And it went so well that sometimes they really just run off on their own course and I had to catch up what's going on. But it's good because it was a really, really, really good team we developed into. It took 1-2 years to earn their trust and to get a more smooth up and running.
And how did you earn that trust?
I had to, first of all, every time there was trouble, I had to go in and take responsibility. Again, the soccer coach, I had to go forward and say, to the customer, I really apologize if we failed. I had to go back to my boss and say the same thing. We on this project we didn't achieve the result we expected. We failed. I apologize. This is my fault. So they, in front of the team, they could see, okay, I'm on their side. And once I earned that trust, then we could talk business. Secondly, I always reward initiative, encourage initiative.
How do you reward it?
It's actually so simple. It's not monetary. It's appraisals. It's all about appraisals in front of the others. Appraise someone.
Okay, so on that point,
Yeah.
in some cases, being singled out for recognition, praise, in front of their peers
Right.
makes some Japanese staff very uncomfortable.
Right.
Because they don't want to stand out from the crowd. They
Right.
don't want to be recognised that way
Right.
in public.
Right.
Privately, probably very happy for it
Right.
to happen over a lunch or something,
Right.
but in front of others, because they worry that others will start bitching about them,
Right.
complaining about them,
Right.
or bad-mouthing
Jealousy,
them.
yeah.
Jealousy, right?
Right.
How do you work that out? Because as a foreigner,
Yeah.
we might think, well, of course, we'll praise them. Everyone will be happy.
Right.
But sometimes you find they're not that happy,
Exactly. Yeah, so we don't do like employee of the month, having a guy's picture and on the wall and stuff like that, like we do more in Anglo-Saxon cultures. Instead, it can be done much more subtle. That when you do, like, for example, the month's result, I always present to people so they know where's the ship sailing, how's it going. I think that's extremely important. When we present the month's result, and then it says, thanks to the fortune of this business, it developed really, really well. Our company is doing so well, and we're actually ahead of budget at this moment. That's really, really great. I don't have to say the person's name, but I stick to the business. That's really, really great. But everybody knows in the room who was in charge of that project that was very successful. So that person I can see smiling very, very well. But I don't single her or him out in the meeting.
Right.
But I stick to the business. But I do think recognition is extremely, extremely important. And I think there's one other lesson. A Japanese manager, president, CEO, can be a little bit more harsh to people and they don't get that offended. But I do find when foreigners are a little bit harsh to Japanese, they can get very offended very quickly. I found that as well in Malaysia, in Indonesia, in China, in Vietnam especially. When you are a foreigner, you have to step a little bit more careful and be very careful about how you communicate with people. They take easy offense, it's easy to misunderstand each other. So that internal communication I find is everything here.
If you want to be successful as a leader, do the Leadership Training for Managers course. All companies need people who can both manage and lead. Leading people screams out for real skills in communication, dealing with all different types of people, being excellent at innovation, planning, delegation, handling mistakes, doing performance reviews really well, and inspiring and motivating the team. Do the Leadership Training for Managers course now in either Japanese or English. Are you doing business with Japan? Do you really know how things work? Japan Business Mastery provides the answers. Do you have the right networks and know how to create them? Do you know how to get on the same wavelength with Japanese buyers? Do you know what being trustworthy looks like from the Japanese perspective? Japan Business Mastery is based on more than 30 years' experience in Japan and will become your go-to guide. Want to succeed in Japan? Buy Japan Business Mastery now. How long have you been in this job now?
10 years now.
10 years now, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you think back through your career across these different companies in Japan, you know, some things you've mentioned already which probably work well to get teams engaged.
Right. Any
other things you've found, this really gets people engaged in the company?
Right. I think that, you mentioned in one of your questions about APEX scores and engagement scores, and in Japan typically has low engagement scores, right? And that is the challenge I had in the furniture business and a little bit also in this business. How do you get people more engaged? How do you get people to have energy when they come into work? And I think it's fun to come to work. And it can be simple things. Productivity is extremely important. And I can see when I sit in a meeting and I'm bouncing off ideas from my head, and people are just tired. And they said, when will this guy stop talking?
Your energy is giving them sunburn.
Right. And I can see that. So one of the things I very quickly introduced in our company was flexibility in our working times. This is before Corona, before remote work. So people can come and go as they please. I try to cut down all overtime work as much as possible. And it's simply, we start at 9 and we finish 5:15. I really like people to be out of the office by 6. Everybody. I don't want zombies around.
That's interesting about overtime, because it took me a little while to work out that a lot of the overtime in the companies I was in was being driven by the financial part of the reward of overtime by getting extra money.
Yeah.
And so people were doing 8 hours work in 10 and 11 hours.
Right.
They weren't doing 10 or 11 hours of work. They're doing 8 hours of work, but stretching it out to make money.
Right.
And a lot of cases I found that they were just sort of racking up overtime with no oversight.
Right.
So I decided, well, that makes no sense, because the Australian mentality is you come in, go really hard, go home. Go to the gym, sports, hobbies, go to the bar, dinner with friends, time with your family, and but it's hard while you're there. So I thought, well, why don't we do it that way? Why don't I say, like you, in principle, no overtime. You have to actually you have to apply to work overtime. Right. And a lot of times, not that there's that much application for it, but I will challenge it. Well, why do you need to work this overtime? Right. Is this really required? Right. And part of it is control that cost part, but also to change the mentality about the productivity against the time that they have to work in. Like Parkinson's law says, the time is this big. Well, the work will expand to match that time. So if you've got 11 hours, then the work will take 11 hours. Right. If you've got 8 hours, the work will take 8 hours.
Exactly.
So what's your experience with this?
Oh, absolutely. So as soon as I cut down overtime, people come in suddenly with more fresh look in their eyes, and suddenly they engage when we sit there and bouncing off ideas, and they come in with interesting input. And then I become quiet and let them have the conversation, right? So that was super fun. Instead of you sitting with a bunch of zombies, because when they're overtime, they still have to transport 2 hours back and forth to work. Yeah. They still have to watch a little bit Netflix, talk to their wives or husbands, eat something. So what do? They cut down on sleeping. And I had staff who says, I only sleep 4 hours a night. Yeah, I can see that. Because you're a zombie when you're here. I prefer you have 7 hours. Then you could be more productive. So that was the main thing.
And did COVID, you already started the flexibility of work.
Right.
But coming back to your point before about the productivity of people, presumably they're able to do this job from home, or everyone had to be in the office during COVID?
During COVID, of course, there was, during the bad time, it was full remote work. And then half a year into it, I turned it around to 2 days per week. You have to be in the office. And now it's 3 days you have to be in the office, and 2 days you can work remote. Not have to, you can work remote. Why is that? Because we work very much on project-based. So our ongoing business is just maintenance. Customer order, we have to make sure it's delivered. We buy it from somewhere, get it into a warehouse, quality check it, and ship it out to the customer, send an invoice. Very simple, just standard business. That can be done from anywhere. But the projects we're doing on business development requires a lot of interaction all the time between us. And I believe face-to-face communication is really important. You can't really problem solve, do face-to-face communication on a Teams call with 2, 3, 4, 5 people. At least in my experience, it doesn't work. So I'm there every day. I don't do remote work. I'm there Monday to Friday in the office. And
through COVID.
Right through COVID. Because they need to see me. They need to see me. I am the captain of the ship, and they need to know there's that stability. And they need to come into my office always and engage with me when there's an issue or challenge. And they do that. They like that. So, I think that's very important.
And you talk too, about people being tired and not having many ideas and meetings, etc. What have you found works well to get people to come up with innovative ideas? Have you got any brainstorming systems or techniques or procedures, structures that you use?
Yeah, it's more an intuitive approach. I simply sit down people and I tell them, today's agenda is so and so and so. We're going to brainstorm on this issue. How can we develop some other products within this kind of drinking technology? For example, cold coffee or non-alcohol beer or soft drink. What kind of other dispense products can we bring into Japan and sell here in Japan? And we're going to discuss it today, and then we're going to discuss it on Tuesday again. And fire away. And usually in the beginning, it's pretty quiet. Nobody's not coming up. But that's okay, because we'll have a follow-up meeting the week after. And then during the weekend, they thought about it. The brain starts working, the subconscious starts working on it. And then on Tuesday, suddenly stuff comes up. So I usually have 2 or 3 meetings on the same topic several times. So
you couldn't do it the other way around. You couldn't say, next Tuesday, we're going to have a meeting, and we're going to talk about this. So have a think about it over the weekend.
No.
When you come on Tuesday, come with some ideas. No. It doesn't work that way.
No, because they are focused on their daily business. As you said, they got their 100 emails. They got it. Yeah, whatever.
Right.
So no, you got to put them on the spot, and they go, no idea. Well, think about it. And then we'll talk again next Monday, and then you push again, and then the brain starts working. You have to force it a little bit, I think. You have to give the system a little bit of shock.
My experience too, if I ask any Japanese team member, well, what do you think about X? Straight off the top.
Right.
They panic. Yeah. They freeze. Yeah. They cannot answer. They are scared that they'll say the wrong thing or a stupid thing or lose face or whatever. Yeah. So generally speaking, and because we're a training company, we're getting people to come up with ideas in the classes as well. Right. We do the same thing. We say, okay, write down a few ideas on X, Y, Z, and you give them time.
Right.
And then you just ask them, well, what did you write down?
Right.
And now they've had a little bit of time to think about it, and so they're not caught flat-footed. Right. And they'll come up with some ideas. It tends to cut out that ambush, what they consider an ambush attack,
Right.
asking for ideas, give them a little bit of warning.
Right.
But you're still you're on the spot.
Right.
You're there. What did you come up with, So that might be an idea to try that as well in your meeting before you get into the start of it. Give them about 5 or 10 minutes just to think or write something down.
Right.
And we don't ask them, what idea did you have? We ask them, what did you write down? Totally different picture, because when you ask what's your idea, or panic, when you ask what did you write down, oh, well, this is what I wrote down.
Right.
Somehow psychologically,
Right.
that makes a big difference.
Yeah, big difference.
Yeah,
big
yeah,
difference,
yeah,
I
yeah.
think so.
So what other things do you use to get ideas out of the team? Creativity?
I do like to have them in plenum now, because now we have a culture where it's okay to fail, and it's taking initiative is rewarded.
So how does that work? Because, as we both know, this is a no defect culture as far as products go.
Right.
And the sort of fail fast, minimum viable, product, it doesn't work in Japan. It's got to be a highly viable product or no one wants to know about it. So to get Japanese to get out of that cultural preference for no mistakes, no failure, to experiment and try things, because innovation's a messy process.
Yeah.
There's bound to be mistakes.
It has to be.
How do you get them through that cultural preference for no mistakes?
So we all need to get inspired, right? And I can't do the inspiration alone, because I don't have all the knowledge in the world to do so. So in our meetings, I invite our American colleagues on Teams to join. And our American colleagues are entrepreneurs and extremely innovative, great guys, lots of energy, and they try off 1,000 products, 950 of them fails, but 50 of them go through, and they make a lot of money on that. And it's really inspiring for our team to hear, wow, they have so many ideas, wow. And in the beginning they'll say, oh, that would never work in Japan, that would never work in Japan. But then something triggers through. But I might take that product, but if I then change the size of it, made it smaller, and made this and this, it might actually work. Let me work on that. So suddenly there's a new idea. And then I said, that's interesting. That's a new project. Go. So we have that. So we need inspiration, of course. We need new energy. And that's what I do. I invite people from all over the world to join on Teams now in our meetings. And I invite the guys from Germany. I invite the guys from Denmark. So from all over the world. So that gives them inspiration. It also is interesting for them is then they are then also allowed to tell, what are you guys doing in Japan? And then they tell the Americans, we are doing so and so and so. And that also gives them kind of confidence in themselves, which also
pride
is really
what
pride,
Japan's
right?
doing.
Yeah, very much so. So, it's think globally, but act locally. And that is, of course, Japan is different. Everything is smaller here. Everything has to be innovative in a Japanese way. But we still can get that inspiration from overseas. So that's what I do.
Yeah, people don't appreciate the differences. I remember I was in Shimbashi, one of those typical hole-in-the-wall little yakitori shops, having a couple of yakitori and a couple of beers. And then every couple of hours, this little old guy would turn up on this 50cc motorbike with a case of beer, a couple of cases of beer strapped on the back, because that little hole in the wall had no space.
Right.
To store the beer, and that guy would have to keep coming back every couple of hours.
Right.
And when you sort of see that, you start to understand the distribution system here is totally different. Totally different. And so just little things like that trigger that.
Yeah.
You talked a lot about trust already. You talked about having a lot of conversations with people to build the trust. Anything else you found that you thought worked well in terms of getting trust?
I do believe that you really can't take away initiative or ownership from people. Because then you get into the manual culture that we as foreigners hate so much.
When you say, I'll just explain for people who don't know what manual culture means. It doesn't mean manual labor. It means there's a manual that tells you step by step how to do any process, and you must follow each of those steps perfectly. You cannot vary from the steps. That's what you mean.
Exactly what I mean. And that drives us foreigners insane always when we come here, because that's not maybe what the customer is asking for. The customer says, I like it, but I would like to have it in a different color. But the manual doesn't say, it's in blue color. So no, we are going to reject you. And then you lose the sales. And as a businessman, you are very much, as a foreigner, you are a result-oriented person. And you come here and it drives you mad because it's a very process-oriented culture that you're entering into. So I believe extremely in delegating responsibility to the right people, of course, having that culture where people take ownership. And it's extremely important, and when they take ownership, they understand the vision for the company, and they understand the business plan that we made together, and they run after that. That is extremely important.
So how do you reinforce that? Because you don't have such a large team. There's probably under 15 people on the team, right? So it's a reasonably small group. But a lot of companies, they're going to have a lot of team members. So what have you found works well in terms of having that idea of what's the vision, mission, values, that type of idea really come alive for the team?
Right. So it is setting the right team around you as a president, right? Or as a CEO or whatever you are. You need to have the right team. We know that from the top 100 performing companies on the stock exchanges, those CEOs sits there usually very quiet. They are not the ones in the press. They're not Elon Musk or Steve Jobs was. These are quiet people who sit around with a perfect team, and then they perform really, really well. And I think that matches everywhere. You gotta set yourself with the right team here in Japan. You gotta make sure you have the trust of those people. And even though, in Denmark, my first job, I had 200 people under me. In my job, it's the same thing. You surround yourself with 5 or 10 guys, you set up the right team, and you delegate responsibility to those guys, and they must take ownership, right? And the most important is they understand the vision, they understand the business plan we made together. And then you just can't sit back and then do your solitaire on your computer and all the other guys are working for you. Of course, you you have to run out there, problem solve together with them, you have to follow up with them, how is it going, you have to take an interest in them, what's going on, of course. So that's it. It sounds so simple, but of course, in real life, it's always hard to do.
Interesting too about culture, because it's sort of related to that vision, mission, values idea. And often you'll have a global culture, or even something that they want to have equally present around the world. That's you can understand. East Asiatic Company in any country, or is going to be similar. And then you have the sort of local Japanese culture. There's always a bit of a blend between that global culture and the local culture. How do you build culture in Japan?
Oh, wow, that's a tough question. So first of all, what is culture actually, right? Because you have a national culture, but if you dive beneath that, then you've got organizational culture. And if you come from a traditional manufacturing company in Japan, you have a maybe very specific conservative culture, and you go into an IT company in Tokyo, you can have a very open culture. So I think the first thing is put the ear down to the ground and figure out what's the culture in this organization, and then start working on developing that culture in the direction you want it to be. And if it's a very maintenance organization, but you want it to be a business development or aggressive sales organization, then you have to figure out what are the triggers, what are the values, and what are the concerns. And I found very often that it's not that people don't want to follow your direction, it's that there are some issues, there are some real issues in there that you have to address. And you have to figure out what are those issues. And if you can figure out what are those issues, really the concerns, the fears, the anxiety, the stress that are in there, if you can figure out and resolve those, then you got people on your side. Then you earn their trust. You can't earn people's trust by just taking a drink with them. They're not that stupid. You have to figure out and solve their problems. You have to figure out what is the real issue here. And that I done every time. And it takes a while before people open up to you and being really honest with you. I'm really afraid of so-and-so to fail with this customer because we tried that before and it was horrible, and I'm afraid to lose my job. Okay, all right, now we got something to work with. But to get people to open up, to be a little bit vulnerable to you, and you have to earn their trust somehow, right? And that's what I try to do.
And in terms of, if you're going to give some advice to someone who is being sent to Japan, they don't know Japan, they don't speak the language, but they're going to have a responsibility for the organization in Japan to run it.
Right.
What would be some advice you'd give them?
I think you come in, first write down your first impression, and put that somewhere in your calendar and make sure it comes up every 3 months or 6 months, 9 months to see how much have your impression changed. Because it's always interesting to see your first impression, because there are some truth in it, for sure. Secondly, of course, you have to listen to your organization, figure out what are the issues, what's really going on in this market here. Earn their trust, as we talked about. And once you earn their trust, then you can start to implement the change that you want to see to happen. But at the same time, as a foreigners, we have a responsibility here. We can't just go local. I mean, if we go local and we earn so much trust and we go so much local, they might as well fire me and just put in a Japanese guy instead. No need to have a foreigner. So how can I add value here? A lot of foreigners, in my experience, tends to be the communicator between the head office overseas and the sales company domestic. And that's it. And that was great for an expat role 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. But I think today, business requirement is that we have to add much more value, especially on the sales or on the business development. We have to take an active part of that. And that's where you have to figure out, as a foreigner, where can I add value here? What's my role here? Try to figure out what's your role. It can be difficult. It's very easy to just sink back and just be the communicator between the head office and your sales staff. Don't do that. Don't do that. Go out there and do some business also on your own.
Should they learn Japanese? That was a very big sigh.
Yeah,
a very big sigh.
I have, in 22 years I've been here, I've had a lot of people come out with perfect university speaking Japanese. And they come up to me and he says, William, I speak much better Japanese than you. I can read 2, 3, 4, 5,000 kanji. I'm perfect. Yeah, that's great. Congratulations. Now you can do the same as 127 million Japanese also can do. What else can you do?
What else can you do, exactly?
Yeah. So I don't hire them. I think that, first of all, you have to recognize you come here as a businessman, so you come here to do business. And that's what you should focus on first. I think that learning Japanese as an adult is a bit tough. It's a bit tough. I'm still struggling with my kanjis and my Japanese. I speak some enough to go by in a daily life, but I don't think you should spend thousands and thousands of hours on trying to learn it.
If you go to a business meeting with your team, to the client, do you speak in Japanese to the client, or your team translates?
No, I speak in Japanese with my staff. I speak Japanese with the client if we are social, if we are entertaining. But in business meetings, especially if there are several more members, I do tend to speak in English. And in the big corporations, in the breweries, most of them understand English.
They can speak enough English,
they can speak. And my team is usually, my sales, my key account manager on a specific customer is usually having the dialogue anyways. I'm the one who has to explain what is the reason behind something's gone bad, or what is the reason behind something's going really well, or price negotiations or something like that. So it's okay. I think it's very important not to speak too casual Japanese in a formal meeting.
That doesn't go down too well.
So that's it. My advice to foreigners who come in here: figure out where you can add value. If you spend all your energy in just learning Japanese, you're just doing the same thing as 127 million Japanese are doing. So figure out where you can add business value.
And is there anything I haven't asked you about leading in Japan, which we should have covered?
No, I think we went around the whole thing. I mean, the Mitsui people used to really like to tell me that, oh, you come from a hunter-gatherer culture, which is not really correct, but that is their perspective. You come from a hunter-gatherer culture, William. You run out in the forest with your spear individually and try to catch that deer. We are a farming culture. We are rice farmers. We have to work in a collective. We sit out there.
He was thinking of your Viking heritage.
Yeah.
Raiding.
Absolutely.
Not farming.
Absolutely. What they were trying to put across was, we are a group consensus people. And that is very true. That is very true. And that is the key thing you have to understand here. That they need group consensus. You got group consensus, you can do whatever you want with the organization. If you don't have it, they will work against you. They will. They are not that loyal as you think they are. So group consensus, understand that. Understand those drivers and triggers.
What would be your definition of leadership?
My definition of leadership is inspiring a team to achieve your vision. That's my definition.
Okay. Very good. Very good. William, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's been great
exploring
your adventures here in Japan. And
thank you very
teams.
much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Join us again for our next episode of Japan's top business interviews.